He wasn't crying. He was just waiting. A tiny German shepherd puppy in a child's sweater, sitting alone on the subway seat. Phones flashed. People laughed. No one reached out. When the last passengers left, he stayed. And when the lights dimmed and the train rolled toward the depot, he was still there, still waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Late afternoon light leaked down the stairs at 96th Street and smeared gold across the platform. The car sighed, the brakes sang, and the whole city pressed in, loud and busy and blind. On a blue plastic seat, that little pup sat upright like a forgotten toy, a small dog wrapped in a kid's sweater that didn't quite fit. A metro ticket lay beside him, face up like a name tag, and a single dollar curled against the edge as if it could pay for kindness. He was a German shepherd puppy, 3 months if that, a young shepherd with paws too big for his body and a heartbeat you could see in his throat. He didn't whine, didn't bark, didn't move. The abandoned puppy just watched the tunnel the way a loyal puppy watches a door that never opens. A boy's sweater on a stray pup, soft and worn, the kind a four-legged friend would never choose to take off. Someone had dressed this furry pup for warmth and then left him to ride the line like luggage. That was the part that hurt most. Not the noise, not the speed, the stillness. The car filled again. People framed him in their screens like he was a meme, an accessory, a moment to collect. A playful puppy would have nosed their shoes, but this young dog kept his eyes on the dark, like the dark might answer back. I stood there with my toolkit on my belt and my name tag, catching the station light, trying to swallow the metal taste of anger. I'm Michael Ortega, 52, MTA maintenance, the guy who keeps things moving when they want to stop. But right then, I wanted everything to stop. I wanted the conductor to cut the power, the city to hush, the river to hold its breath, just so one small shepherd dog didn't have to pretend he belonged to no one. The train chimed, doors slid, the crowd shifted, and the little companion didn't flinch. German shepherd puppy, brave pup, tiny statue of patience. The ticket said nothing. The dollar said less. The sweater said everything. It said somebody once cared and then didn't. I took a step closer, and the young puppy finally turned his head, slow, like it cost him courage. His eyes were too old for that small face. They looked past me, past the seats, past the ads about weekend service changes, to some place where a hand used to be. I whispered, "Hey, buddy," and my voice came out with the gravel of too many night shifts and not enough sleep. He blinked. His ear twitched. The abandoned puppy leaned an inch toward the memory of kindness and then froze, as if kindness might bite. I could feel the car's heartbeat under my boots, that steady shudder that tells you New York is alive and late. I could feel my own heartbeat answer, a slower drum, a stubborn drum, the kind that says do something. Above us, the city kept moving. Below us, the tracks kept humming. Between those two motions sat one small life trying not to ask for help. The platform emptied. The conductor gave the all clear. We rolled south toward the yard, tunnel air slipping through the windows like cold breath. He stayed where he'd been placed, a little pup in a child's sweater, a shepherd pup with no flock, no crying, no sound, just waiting. When the car lights shifted to night mode and the station names slid by like distant promises, he didn't budge. And when the final stop bell rang and the doors sighed open onto the quiet of the depot, the tiny German shepherd puppy was still there, still waiting, and I was the only one left who hadn't walked away. The depot lights hit like hospital lamps, bright, sterile, unforgiving. The little German shepherd puppy sat where the world had left him, small paws tucked in, sweater stretched across his ribs. He looked at me once and then down again, like he'd already learned that eye contact could be dangerous. I'd seen dogs on platforms before, strays near tunnels, even kittens between rails, but never one left sitting on a seat, like a passenger who paid his fare in heartbreak. The air in the empty car was too quiet. Every sound, the drip of a vent, the hum of the lights, felt heavy around him. I crouched, slow, careful, like you do when you're not sure if the creature in front of you will bolt or break. "Hey, buddy," I said again, my voice softer this time. The young pup's ear twitched. The abandoned puppy tilted his head just enough to let me see his face under the edge of that tiny sweater, eyes dark, wet and scared, but too tired to run. There was no collar, no tag, just the ticket and the dollar still lying beside him, as if somebody thought that made him someone else's problem. I could smell the faint sweetness of detergent on his sweater, like something pulled from a laundry basket instead of a closet. It was a child's. You could tell by the cartoon stitched on the sleeve, a yellow rocket, half peeled away from time or tears. Someone had dressed this little dog for warmth and then walked away. I don't know why that detail hit harder than anything else. Maybe because kindness halfway done feels colder than none at all. I reached out my hand, palm open, letting the German Shepherd puppy decide what came next. He stared at it, nostrils flaring, tiny body trembling but holding his ground. Brave pup, pretending he wasn't afraid. His fur was coarse near the neck, baby soft at the muzzle. When he finally leaned forward, it wasn't trust, it was exhaustion. He was too tired to keep resisting the idea that someone might care. I slid the dollar aside, pocketed the ticket, and lifted him with both hands. He didn't struggle. He just pressed his nose into my sleeve and stayed there, heartbeat frantic against my arm. I'd never felt something that light weigh that much. This little shepherd pup didn't just need a home. He needed proof that humans could mean something good again. I looked down the length of the car one last time. Empty seats, flickering lights, the smell of oil and dust and waiting. I whispered, "Let's get you out of here, kid." The young shepherd exhaled, a small shudder that sounded like relief or surrender. And as I carried him through the silent tunnel toward the service gate, I had no idea that this was the easy part. The hard part would begin the moment the light hit us again. The air outside the car felt different, heavier, older, like the smell of metal that's seen too much. The depot at night is a quiet kind of hell, echoing tunnels, flickering bulbs, the ghosts of 1,000 trains gone by. And in my arms, that German Shepherd puppy didn't move. He was light as a breath, warm but trembling, his head pressed into my sleeve like he was trying to disappear. A tiny dog in a child's sweater smelling of laundry soap and loss. I walked slow, careful not to startle him, my boots hitting the concrete between puddles of oily water. Each step echoed back at me like the city was counting how long it took before someone cared. The little pup's heartbeat was racing against my arm. Thump, thump, thump. A rhythm of fear more than life. He wasn't crying, not even whimpering, and that silence hurt worse than any sound could. A puppy that small should bark, should play, should demand the world. But this abandoned puppy had learned already that asking doesn't help. Under the depot lights, I saw how thin he really was. The sweater hung loose around his ribs, sleeves too long for his legs. His fur, that black and tan coat every shepherd dog wears like armor, was matted near the collarbone, soft near the muzzle, trembling with each breath. A young shepherd, maybe 3 months old, trying to hold himself together. There was no tag, no clue, just that ticket and that crumpled dollar I'd taken from the seat, relics of a cruelty that thought it looked like care. He blinked up at me once, eyes wide and glassy. In the distance, a maintenance car rumbled past, throwing orange sparks into the dark. The sound made him flinch, small, sudden, sharp, and then bury his face deeper into my jacket. I could feel his ribs against my chest. Every rise and fall was a story of waiting too long. I whispered, "You're safe now, kid." Though I didn't know if that was true. New York eats the word safe for breakfast. The young dog's ear twitched when I spoke. His breathing slowed a little, like maybe he wanted to believe me. He smelled like dust and detergent and something else, something lonely. There's a scent that only stray pups carry, a mix of hope and hunger and the echo of whoever walked away. That smell stays with you. It follows you home, gets under your skin, and keeps you awake long after the noise of the city dies. I stopped near the service gate where the tunnel split, the world above starting to hum again. He looked up at the sound, eyes catching the first hint of light through the stairwell. He didn't blink, didn't whine, just stared at that light like he was trying to remember what warmth looked like. And for a second, I thought maybe I saw him start to trust it. But then he shivered again, a small, quick tremor. And I realized the world had already taught him not to. I pulled the sweater tighter around him and whispered, "Let's go home, buddy." He didn't understand the words, but he stopped shaking for a moment. That was enough. I pushed open the door to the night above, not knowing that this little shepherd pup hadn't just been left behind. He'd been left to remind me what being human still means. The first hit of cold air outside the depot made him gasp, a small broken sound like something inside his chest had rusted shut. I pulled him closer, feeling his tiny ribs move against my arm. The German Shepherd puppy didn't struggle, didn't bark, didn't even look around. He just pressed his head against my coat, hiding from the night like it was something that could still take him. New York at night doesn't care who you are, man, dog, or ghost. The streets hum, the lights flicker, the trash blows across the asphalt, and everything keeps moving. But this small dog was done moving. He'd already ridden the train to the end of the line, and somehow he'd survived it. I wrapped him in my jacket, the way you hold something fragile that isn't yours yet, but already matters. The young pup's nose was cold, his ears twitching every time a car horn cut through the air. His sweater smelled faintly like detergent and a kid's room. A smell that shouldn't belong to a stray pup sitting in the arms of a stranger under a sodium streetlight. Every few steps, he'd lift his head, glance at the noise, then tuck it back into my sleeve. A brave pup trying to believe the world had stopped spinning, long enough planned to take him home. At least that's what I told myself while unlocking my old Ford parked by the fence. But when I set him down on the seat, he gave me that look. That quiet, heavy look only a loyal puppy gives when he's decided you're it. That look makes you guilty for every second you hesitate. I sighed, rubbed the back of my neck, and muttered, "All right, kid, you win." He didn't move, just blinked, slow and tired, like he'd been waiting all day for someone to lose that argument. Driving through the Bronx at 2 a.m. with a rescued puppy in a too small sweater isn't exactly a movie moment. Streetlights flicker. The radio hisses between stations. And somewhere in the passenger seat, a tiny German Shepherd pup starts to breathe easier, each inhale a little less afraid. I caught his reflection in the windshield, big ears, soft eyes, face full of exhaustion. He looked like he was trying to stay awake in case the dream ended. But when the car hit the bridge and the city lights stretched behind us, he finally fell asleep. His head rested against my arm, warm and heavy now. That's when I realized how small he really was. Too young to be alone, too quiet to have been treated right. And yet, somehow, he was still alive, still trusting enough to sleep beside a stranger. I whispered into the silence, "You made it off that train, buddy. That's gotta mean something." He didn't answer, of course, but his paw twitched against my sleeve, just once, like maybe he heard me. And I knew right then, this wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something neither of us saw coming. He woke up the moment the car stopped, like he'd learned that silence never meant safety. The little German Shepherd puppy blinked at me, dazed, his ears tilted unevenly like radar dishes trying to find a signal. I'd parked outside my building in the Bronx under a flickering streetlight that made the world look half alive. For a second, he didn't move. Then that small dog pressed his nose to the window and just stared at the night like he was trying to remember what freedom used to feel like. I opened the door slow. The air smelled like rain and rust, New York's version of mercy. He hesitated, paws trembling on the seat, sweater slipping off one shoulder. I could see how thin he was now that the light hit him right. You could count every rib under that patchy fur. A young shepherd barely holding on, dressed in something that should have meant love. And all I could think was, somebody made him look like a child just to make it easier to abandon him. "Come on, kid," I whispered, holding out my hand. He sniffed it once, then looked straight at me, that stare that cuts through excuses. No fear, no trust either, just the quiet question. "Are you going to leave too?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. I scooped him up again, jacket around his body, and carried him upstairs through the stale hallway that always smelled like bleach and takeout. Every step, I felt him shaking, not from cold this time, but from remembering. There's a certain kind of tremor that comes from being left too often. It lives in the bones, and this shepherd pup carried it like luggage. Inside my apartment, the lights felt too bright. I turned them down, set him on the couch, and watched him curl instantly into the corner, still half hiding. The German Shepherd puppy didn't bark, didn't whine, just pressed his paws into the fabric like he was testing if it would disappear too. His reflection caught in the window, tiny shape in a big city, a young dog who looked like he didn't belong anywhere. I went to the kitchen, filled a bowl with water. He didn't move when I set it down, just watched me, chest rising slow, eyes deep and waiting. Then, One paw stretched forward, then another. He drank, slow, careful, as if the bowl might vanish mid-sip. And when he lifted his head again, I swear there was something new in his eyes. Not trust yet, but something that looked like thinking about it. I sat on the floor beside him. He didn't flinch this time, didn't back away. He just exhaled. A sound small enough to break a heart, and lowered his head onto his paws. The abandoned puppy closed his eyes like maybe, just maybe, he'd earned one night without fear. Outside, the subway rumbled under the city, the same train that once carried him nowhere. And inside, a single lamp burned soft against the dark. For the first time, the little shepherd pup wasn't waiting for a train to stop. He was waiting for morning. He didn't sleep for long. Every sound pulled him back. The hum of the fridge, a car door outside, the heating pipes clicking in the wall. The little German shepherd puppy would lift his head, eyes wide, like he was back on that train seat, waiting for someone to come back who never would. Then he'd curl tighter, nose tucked under his paw, and breathe through the fear like it was something you could outlast if you stayed still enough. I sat there watching him from the kitchen floor, coffee in hand, wondering what kind of person could dress a pup in a child's sweater and then walk away. The more I looked, the more that sweater broke me. It was soft blue, frayed at the cuffs, a rocket stitched on the sleeve, half torn off, too small for comfort, too clean for the street. A loyal puppy wearing someone else's love like a costume he didn't understand. Around 5 a.m., I heard a sound. Soft, scraping, hesitant. He was trying to stand. The young pup's legs shook, his paws slipping on the couch fabric. He was weak, maybe dehydrated, maybe just tired of fighting gravity. I got down on one knee, held out my hand again. The rescued puppy froze, nostrils flaring. Then, slow as sunrise, he leaned in and sniffed my fingers. Once, twice, and this time he didn't pull away. "Good boy," I whispered, voice breaking around the words. The German shepherd puppy tilted his head, studying me like I was something fragile too. I didn't move, didn't want to break the spell. Then he did something that made me forget how to breathe. He took one shaky step forward and rested his paw on my hand. Just that. No barking, no wagging tail, just touch. Gentle, deliberate, and full of a question I already knew the answer to. I felt his weight, barely a few pounds, but enough to crush every wall I'd built between me and feeling too much. He looked up, eyes glassy and tired but steady, like he decided maybe I wasn't the kind who leaves. A small dog, a lost heartbeat, a life that had every reason to give up, standing there asking for one more try. I exhaled, slow, the kind of breath that feels like surrender. "All right, kid," I said quietly. "Let's start over." He blinked, head tilted again, and for the first time his tail moved. Just a flick, small and unsure, but real. The first sign of trust, fragile as glass, alive as hope. He took another step closer, then another, until he was right against my chest. The fur under that sweater felt warmer now, less trembling, more heartbeat. He pressed his nose under my chin and stayed there. Just breathing. No words, no sound, just the quiet of something broken, learning how to mend. Outside, the first train of the morning roared beneath us, shaking the windows. He didn't flinch this time. He just sighed, that small, almost human sigh. And I knew the worst part of his waiting was finally over. Morning found him still pressed against my chest like a secret I hadn't earned yet. The city yawned, heat pipes hissed, and that German shepherd puppy lifted his head as if the new light needed permission. I poured water into a bowl and set it down, and the little pup watched the ripples like they were weather he had to survive. He stepped forward, slow, careful, a small dog measuring the distance between fear and hunger. He drank, then looked up at me with those steady, serious eyes that make grown men rethink what strength means. I took off the child's sweater to wash it and felt his body tense at the bare air. Thin shoulder blades, a young shepherd built for running who had learned to sit very still. The fabric was softer than it looked, frayed at the cuffs, the yellow rocket on the sleeve barely hanging on. On the inside hem, tucked where only worry hands would find it, pink thread spelled two small initials. Someone stitched hope into this rescued puppy and still let him ride alone. I held the sweater under warm water and watched a line of city dust run from it like a memory you don't want but can't keep. He stayed close, nose near the sink, eyes flicking between me and the cloth as if his past might drip right out of it. "Easy, kid." I said, and the words came out tired but clean. He leaned into my leg, a shepherd dog pretending not to need comfort while asking for it anyway. That's when I knew I had to give him something back that couldn't be taken. I dried the sweater and sat on the floor beside him. He stood there, ears cocked, that brave pup posture like a flag that won't lie down. "You need a name," I told him, voice low, rough from years in tunnels and not enough mornings like this. Something that fits a four-legged friend who waited for the world and didn't break. Kellen. The word surprised me as it landed. Kellen, strong, bright, stubborn the way a light is stubborn in a storm. I said it again, softer, and the young puppy blinked like the sound brushed his cheek. Kellen, I repeated, tapping my chest, then touching his. His tail moved once, a careful yes. On the coffee table, the metro ticket and the $1 bill waited like witnesses. I turned the ticket over, last validation, 3:47 p.m., and felt that old iron taste in my mouth, a ride and a buck for a life. I slipped the dollar into the torn pocket of the sweater and set the ticket beside his water bowl, a promise I intended to outlive. This small dog wasn't a problem to tip away. He was a life that chose to stay. Kellen nosed the sweater, then my hand, then the sweater again, as if he could smell the initials through the soap. He pressed his forehead to my wrist and held it there until my own heartbeat slowed to meet his. A loyal puppy learning the shape of home, one breath at a time. I've fixed a lot of things in the dark, but this felt like fixing the dark itself. I told him what men like me say when we mean it, simple and without ceremony. "You're mine, kid." He studied my mouth like understanding lives there. His ears lifted, his body leaned. Something opened in his eyes, not bright, not loud, just warm enough to thaw a corner I'd let freeze. The city rumbled under us like a memory that wouldn't stay quiet. Kellen stood up taller, a growing puppy with a spine again, and the room seemed to grow around him to make space. He took a breath, deeper than any yet, and lifted his muzzle toward me as if he was about to test the sound of his new name. He didn't bark when I said his name the next morning. He answered, a sound barely there, half yawn, half whimper, but it carried a kind of quiet that sticks to your ribs. Kellen, the little German shepherd puppy, had learned that names meant something again. He followed me from room to room, still cautious, his paws making that soft tap-tap on the tile. When I stopped, he stopped. When I turned, he looked up like he was reading my thoughts off my face. It was new for both of us. I wasn't used to being seen like that, and he wasn't used to being safe enough to look. I set down a bowl of oatmeal for myself and one of softened kibble for him. He sniffed it, looked up at me, then back at the bowl, waiting for permission, or maybe forgiveness. "Go ahead," I murmured, half smiling. "You've earned breakfast." He ate like someone afraid the world might change its mind halfway through. Each bite softer, slower, until he finally just sat, tail curled around his paw, watching me like maybe I'd disappear too. That morning light hit his fur, that black and tan shimmer that only a young shepherd can pull off, and I caught myself staring. Under the ribs, there were still shadows, but behind the eyes, there was fight. A growing puppy built from the same stubborn stuff this city runs on. Survive first, heal later. I washed the sweater and hung it by the window. The little initials, pink thread now brighter against the sun, spelled a name I couldn't read. Maybe it didn't matter. Kellen had one now, and maybe that was enough to start rewriting the rest. He found the metro ticket on the table again and pushed it toward me with his nose. That sound, the dry scrape of paper, stopped me cold. It was like he remembered it too, that tiny rectangle of almost lost hope. "You keep it," I said, tucking it under his paw. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing in that curious puppy squint. And for the first time, the German Shepherd pup gave a sound that wasn't fear, a low, clumsy attempt at a bark. It wasn't loud, it wasn't confident, but it was his, the kind of sound that made the whole apartment feel alive again. I laughed, the kind of laugh that starts like a sob and forgets where it was going. He jumped back at the noise, then forward again, unsure which reaction fit better. And in that mess of confusion and trust, something inside both of us clicked. I knelt down, brushing my hand over his back, feeling the warmth of life that hadn't quit. "Good boy, Kellen," I whispered. The loyal puppy leaned into me, not out of need, but out of choice. It was the first honest hug I'd had in years. Outside, a subway train howled through the city and the windows rattled. This time, Kellen didn't flinch. He lifted his head toward the sound, tail thumping once, slow and certain, as if the noise that once meant abandonment now meant something else entirely. The world wasn't done testing us, but for the first time I believed we might just pass. That night, the rain came back, harder this time, thick drops hammering against the window like a memory trying to break in. Kellen, the German Shepherd puppy, lifted his head from the rug, ears twitching with every crack of thunder. He didn't tremble, not at first. He just watched me from across the room, pupils wide, chest tight, like he was waiting to see what I'd do before deciding if he should be afraid. I turned off the TV. Sometimes silence is the only language that doesn't lie. He took a small step forward, cautious, graceful, the way a young shepherd moves when he's still not sure the floor will hold him. The lights flickered. When the next thunder rolled, deep and mean, he flinched. Not much, just enough to break me. I'd seen that same kind of flinch in people, veterans on the subway, kids in shelters, workers who never talk about the night shift. But seeing it in a little pup, barely 3 months old, felt like hearing a song you thought the world had forgotten. I dropped to one knee, held out my hand. He hesitated, nose twitching, paws frozen mid-step. Then, one heartbeat later, he came closer. He pressed his wet nose into my palm and exhaled, a long, shivering breath that sounded like surrender. That's how you know a rescued puppy is finally starting to trust you. Not by wagging, not by barking, but by the quiet that follows the fear. I kept my hand there until the trembling stopped. "Easy, kid," I whispered. "We've both been through worse weather." He climbed onto the couch beside me like he'd done it 1,000 times. His small body curved against my leg, the heat of him grounding me more than I wanted to admit. I could feel the tiny heartbeat against my knee. Fast, stubborn, alive. The thunder hit again, but this time, Kellen didn't pull away. He just looked up at me as if to say, "If you stay, I'll stay too." It's strange what a brave pup can teach you in silence. How to breathe slower, how to stop waiting for the next hit, how to remember that not every sound means danger. I brushed a hand over his back, the fur still damp from his earlier shake, soft as forgiveness. He sighed, that low, honest sigh dogs make when they finally believe they're safe. Then, just as I thought he was drifting off, he lifted his head and barked. One sharp, defiant sound, straight at the thunder. A challenge, a declaration. The bark of a young dog who'd spent too long in silence and finally remembered his voice. The thunder rolled again, but it sounded smaller now. Outside, the city lights bled into the storm, all gold and blue, reflections bending on the glass. Inside, it was just the two of us. A man who fixed broken trains and a loyal puppy who was learning how to fix hearts. I leaned back, hand still on his fur, and whispered, "That's it, Kellen. That's how you win." He pressed closer, eyes heavy but bright, and I realized the storm wasn't the thing to fear anymore. The quiet after it was. Because in that quiet, I knew what came next. The morning. And the world outside our little apartment wasn't finished with either of us yet. The morning after the storm, Kellen stood by the door, waiting, not whining, not pacing, just waiting like a soldier ready for orders. The German Shepherd puppy had that quiet dignity you don't teach. It's carved by whatever the world threw at him before you got there. He wanted to go outside. I could see it in the tilt of his head, in the soft scratch of paw against the mat. So we went. The city smelled new. Metal, rain, and second chances. Kellen's paws hit the wet pavement, and for a second, he froze. The street noise, cars, brakes, voices, all that chaos wrapped around him. I saw his muscles tighten, his ears flick back, his eyes dart from shadow to shadow. That's the thing about a rescued puppy. Survival stays under the skin long after you pull them from the dark. He looked up at me, and I gave the only command that mattered. It's okay. The young shepherd took one shaky step, then another. A growing puppy stepping into the noise of the world again. The leash trembled in my hand, but it wasn't fear. It was life. Fragile, wild, uncooperative life coming back online. We passed the metro entrance. The sound of a train below made him stop cold. I felt that pause like a punch. It wasn't just fear, it was memory. That deep, old kind of remembering that lives in the bones. He turned toward the stairwell, nose twitching, body low. That's where he'd been left. That's where someone decided his story should end. I didn't pull him away. I knelt down beside him, rain dripping from my hood, and said, "You can look if you want, but we don't live there anymore." He blinked. The fur along his back shivered once, then smoothed. He inched closer to the stairs, sniffed the first one, then lifted his paw and placed it firm, steady. It wasn't a whimper, it wasn't a bark, it was a choice. That's when I saw the reflection, just for a heartbeat, in the puddle by the entrance. A man and a small dog, two shapes that didn't belong anywhere, standing right where everything had gone wrong. And somehow, it looked like home. He lifted his head, the ears that once flattened now sharp and tall, catching every drop of sound from the waking city. A loyal puppy who had outlived what was meant to break him. He looked at me. Not up, not down, just level, and I knew we were even now. "Let's go home," I said. He didn't hesitate this time. The little pup walked beside me, shoulder brushing my leg as the train below screamed its usual song. Only now, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like the past, distant, harmless, done. And as we crossed the street, I realized the boy I carried off that platform didn't need saving anymore. He'd already saved himself. He just needed someone to notice. Kellen glanced back once, tail swinging low, eyes calm. Whatever ghosts were left under that station, they weren't his anymore. And for the first time since that night, the leash felt like what it really was, not control. Connection. The next morning, Kellen didn't greet me with his usual spark. The German Shepherd puppy who used to race to the door now just sat by the window. Quiet, ears low, eyes half closed. I knew that look. I'd seen it before in rescue dogs who'd burned through all their adrenaline and finally let the exhaustion crash in. The brave pup wasn't whining. He was just still. I crouched beside him and touched his nose. Warm. Too warm. A knot pulled in my chest. I'd been around enough abandoned puppies to recognize that kind of fever. Sometimes when a small dog finally feels safe, that's when the body stops fighting and the sickness shows up. I wrapped him in a towel and took the subway, the same line where it all began. Funny how the world spins full circle when it's trying to teach you something. He lay in my arms, his breathing shallow but steady, his little head tucked under my chin. A man across the aisle looked down at us, then looked away. I didn't blame him. People have their own trains to catch. At the vet's office, they took him in right away. The tech lifted the shepherd pup gently as if afraid he might dissolve. They ran tests, fluids, a mild antibiotic, nothing dramatic, just enough to give his system a fighting chance. While they worked, I stared at the little sweater they'd folded on the counter, frayed and soft, still holding the faint smell of city metal and rain. That sweater had carried him through the worst. Now it was my turn. When the doctor came back, she smiled, tired but real. "He's strong," she said. "Most abandoned puppies wouldn't have made it through what he did. You got to him just in time." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Just in time. That's not something you hear often down in the subway tunnels. On the ride home, Kellen was back in my arms, an IV bandage on his tiny leg and his nose resting against my sleeve. He opened his eyes once, just enough to meet mine, and I swear there was no fear left, only trust. The kind that doesn't come from being rescued, it comes from being believed in. When we got home, he stumbled to his bowl and drank, slow and careful. Then he looked up at me, that small, wordless question in his eyes. I smiled. "Yeah," I whispered. "We're okay now." He wagged his tail once and curled up by the heater, his fur catching the morning light. For the first time, the German Shepherd puppy didn't look like a stray. He looked like he belonged to someone, and maybe for the first time in years, so did I. But later that night, as I hung his tiny sweater to dry, I saw something tucked deep in the pocket. Something I hadn't noticed before. A folded piece of paper. Small, torn, handwritten. And that's when I realized his story wasn't finished yet. The note was damp, edges crumbling, the ink smudged by time and tears. I unfolded it carefully, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of whatever truth was about to surface. 4 words. That's all it said. "Please love him right." I stared at it for a long time. The German Shepherd puppy, this little soul who had been left on a train seat in a child's sweater, wasn't abandoned out of cruelty. He'd been given away with hope. Someone out there loved him once, maybe too much to watch him suffer, maybe too little to keep fighting for him. Either way, that note wasn't a goodbye. It was a prayer. Kellen stirred beside me, stretching, his soft paw brushing my wrist. The brave pup looked up, eyes steady, the kind of eyes that stop you mid-thought. I ran my hand through his fur, still patchy from the fever, and felt the heartbeat that had refused to quit. He wasn't just a rescued puppy anymore. He was a survivor. And in saving him, maybe I'd rescued something I didn't even know I'd lost. The next morning, we went back to the station. The same seat, same line, different ending. He hopped onto the bench, the same one where the world had once walked past him, and sat proud, tail sweeping the floor. People smiled this time. Phones still came out, but now it wasn't for shock or mockery. It was because they saw something beautiful. Hope. A kid asked if he could pet him. Kellen leaned forward and licked the boy's hand. No fear, no flinch, just trust. And in that simple moment, the city that had failed him once gave him back his place in it. When we headed home, I tucked the note into his collar. Not as a memory, as a promise. I never found out who left him there. Maybe that doesn't matter. Kellen taught me one thing. Sometimes, to fix something, you have to stop everything, even a train. Join our brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.